All right, another podcast from the Michigan Institute of Athletics in Brighton, Michigan. It's going to be a stellar podcast today. I was having some dialogue with the guests before the show, and I'm extremely excited about this episode. For the people that are just joining us, I want to shout out VetLife. VetLife is a 501c3 nonprofit company. It's a company of veterans for veterans. Every veteran faces difficulties when they transition from active duty back to civilian life, and VetLife is there to ease that transition. If you want to reach out to VetLife, you may do so through Instagram or Facebook, or check out their website at vetlifetoday.org. So without further ado, I want to introduce Anton Harb. Anton, we were having some incredible dialogue before this podcast started, so I'm extremely excited about this. For the people that don't know you, before we get into the real power in your story, I want to take it back to where were you born and raised? What were you like as a kid? And what led you to joining the military initially?
Sure. Well, first off, thanks for having me. This is great. Hopefully I can get some of my story out there, and hopefully it inspires some people. So my name is Anton Harb. I grew up in Buffalo, New York, actually. It's my stomping grounds. But Buffalo, New York was where I grew up, and I started off as from a family of 5 people: my mom, my dad, my twin sisters, and I grew up in a simple small town. Tonawanda, New York. It's a suburb outside of Buffalo. Raised in Catholic schools. Started off with, I went to a Catholic college preparatory school. And when I was 16 years old, my path kind of changed. I joined a volunteer fire department. It was a local fire department, and I was not much of a sports guy. I rode crew for a little bit, but I wasn't really into sports and was trying to find my path. And I landed in the local fire department, 16, and that's kind of where my real story began. 9/11 happened in 2001, obviously, and at that time I was attending Buffalo State College. I had just received a 4-year ROTC scholarship. The military, my grandfather was a Marine. He fought in World War II and was a medic. And I remember hearing those stories growing up and the impact that the war had on him. He was a medic in the 2nd Marine Division, fought in Iwo Jima, Saipan, and a lot of those. He was also a firefighter. He was a career firefighter. And so I began to see myself following his path. And the fire department gave me an outlet to kind of it was my first experience with community service, being a part of something that's kind of bigger than myself. I think as Americans, we often focus, we're bred to focus on ourselves and our own families, and it's it's a self-centered culture. So after 9/11 happened, like I said, I'd already joined ROTC. And at that point, I wasn't 100% sure about the military, though. I wasn't sure what that path would be. I was kind of in it for the adventure. I wanted to, travel and have these cool experiences, and got to shoot guns, and it was a good time, right? And then after 9/11 happened, everything changed. On 9/11, I remember at that point I was an 18-year-old kid. And I remember sitting on a fire truck, being in Buffalo. We're about a 5-hour drive from New York City, and we were getting ready to be called in for body recovery. And that had a huge impact, I think, on my outlook that led into my adult life. Having to sit on that fire truck and ponder thank God that never happened. We didn't get called in, thank God. But I have a lot of friends that did. And that experience it did change my life, because now I wanted to join the Army. Now I wanted revenge, and I wanted to avenge what happened. So I went through college. I graduated with a bachelor's in criminal justice, and still wasn't sure what I wanted to do with my life. I became a field artillery officer. I was commissioned as an artillery officer, as a 2nd lieutenant, and went to Fort Sill, Oklahoma for a little stint. And that was another experience that changed my life, because now we're into 2004, into early 2005. The war was hot, and it was kicking off pretty hot. It was pretty bad at that point in time. So I was one of the lucky ones in my class. I had deployment orders before I even left school, right? So I was 23 years old. They loaded me up on an airplane. I left artillery school as a dumb second lieutenant who really didn't know anything. Was loaded onto an airplane and dropped off in Tal Afar, Iraq, which is a lovely little place in northern Iraq, the Mosul area, which was a well-known area because of ISIS and what happened after the initial invasion. And that Iraq was again, when I showed up, I was looking for adventure. It was cool. I was going to serve my country, and I don't think people realize what serving your country can entail, and the sheer terror that those experiences can bring to people. So was in Iraq and ended up getting medevaced out. I got real sick over there. So I ended up getting medevaced out and brought back stateside, and that's really where things got tough, right? The experiences that I had didn't necessarily, didn't resonate at the time when I was there, right? And it wasn't until I got back home and I thought about the friends I had lost and the lives that we had taken and the reasons that we have done these types of things. I love my country. I've always supported our military, and I always will support our military. But I think there are these experiences that we don't talk about. And when we get home, that's really where the tough part begins. I ended up getting out in 2007. I was medically discharged, and years later ended up getting retired, which is a whole nother story. But so when I left, I wasn't initially retired. It wasn't until years later that they ended up reviewing my case, and that was good. It was a validation of what I did over there. I think when folks were coming back from the war when I was there, it was still, PTSD wasn't a thing. It was there was a big scandal that came out years later in Fort Lewis, Washington, with the way that they were treating veterans, specifically in the mental health unit, which is where I was stationed. I was caught up in that whole mess, and at the time I thought I was defective. I thought that there was something wrong with me, and the services that it was just it was a mess. So I think my childhood. Culturally, I'm Palestinian. I'm a first-generation Palestinian. My dad immigrated, and my family immigrated from the West Bank in Palestine. And I think the resonating stories about the war and the terror that they dealt with back in Palestine, I wasn't just fighting for my country. I was fighting for my family, right? And but sometimes you can only fight so much. It gets tiring after a while.
So one of the things I kind of want to start with is the similar pattern of those post thoughts that so many veterans have. Because like when you were just sitting there saying that to me, it's like chilling that almost every veteran says the same things. Like basically when I was over there and what I was fighting for versus what I was actually doing. Like there's always this vague description of like what torments the brain of a veteran that I can't quite put my finger on, but everybody has that exact same, like when they describe what the PTSD is from, or when they describe like the experiences that they went through, or like their expectations versus reality of what they experienced. There's always this vague, like, you can tell there's psychological trauma in all of these people, or in a very large majority. And like whether you classified PTSD at the time or not, because you know what I mean? Like PTSD is definitely a new, like trendy thing. And thank God it's drawing attention to it. Thank God it's drawing people into noticing that like there's a problem here. But I would imagine that PTSD has existed for all people throughout military service since the dawn of time. If you put yourself in certain environments, it's going to have psychological effects on that subject, right? So I think it's good that it's bringing awareness to it, but I think that like it's almost an obvious that like these people are going to need, restructuring of what the experience was, creating proper perspective from what they went through, understanding right from wrong, good from evil, separating this is normal life. This is not a war zone anymore. My fight or flight instinct doesn't need to be on red alert 24/7. And these are all psychological things. So it's not like if you were wounded in combat and someone could look at you and see that you're hurt, then all of a sudden they know to respond accordingly. But when it's psychological trauma, you look like a regular guy. So it's like, yo, why don't you just get your things together? So I guess before we go past that, can you really relate any certain thing from the experience that caused the most psychological damage or the struggle to where does the main psychological damage come from so that it's so much harder to assimilate back to normal life? Because every veteran that I've spoken to gives me it's almost chilling to me, because it's like the same vague, there's just, you know what I mean? I can't put my finger on what is it that causes the most damage in the mind that's hard to either let go of or that changes you so much. Do you know?
Not being prepared. Your mind, your reality, the perspective that you bring into that situation can't understand at the time what it is you're going to be going through and what it is you're going to be doing. For me, it was kind of twofold. There was the combat aspect of, so I was in a reconnaissance unit. I was a door kicker. That's what we did. We, at the time, my mission in northern Iraq, there was a terrorist, Abu Musab al-Zarqawi, was like the bin Laden of Iraq, right? And it was my unit's job to hunt him down at any costs and get rid of him was the gist of the mission. And in order to perform a mission like that, it gets very dirty very quickly, right? And the things that we're doing, the dirty business, the firefights, is just one component of it. There's the loss of friends, of bonds, of, for me, I ended up serving with my ROTC instructor, who he was my college professor. And I grew up with the man, and we ended up serving in Iraq, and he ended up getting killed. To this day, I still have not come to terms with that, right? So I think the loss that you feel in combat it's this visceral feeling that almost hurts your soul, right? There's a brotherhood, sisterhood among soldiers, Marines, anybody in the military, that it just hurts, right? But there was this second component. Like I said, I was medevaced out of Iraq, right? I was a lieutenant. I was the officer. I was a leader, right? And really, it was all bullshit. I mean, to be honest, I wasn't prepared for the job I was doing. And when I was medevaced out, I part of my trauma was leaving my men, right? I left these people. I did not want to be medevaced out, right? And I left these guys in a situation that was not good. So for me as a leader, I felt a sense of responsibility for anything that would have happened to them after the fact, right? Because I should have been there. So my trauma was, it's complex in my mind. I don't think it may be straightforward for some folks. There are certain missions that I was a part of that certainly bring back nightmares to this day. I mean, I've had the same nightmare for 15 years now, really. I mean, it's something your mind just plays over and over and over again, and it torments you, right? So I don't think it's one specific thing, but it's a culmination of all these traumatic experiences that you experience 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It is sheer survival, right? And I think too the adrenaline rush that I felt, and it still has not left me to this day. It's like the adrenaline kicked on and it never stopped, and that's really been my big complaint since I've come back, is that fight or flight, it don't stop. Whether I'm in Talafar, Iraq, or Walmart, it doesn't stop. And I think getting the message out there of what PTSD is just as important as helping those who have it, right? People don't recognize the symptoms. If you have a veteran, if we're arguing or hiding, many of us are withdrawn. We don't want to deal with people at all, right? The symptoms generally just look at like someone who's combative, and that's not the case. We have veterans who have post-traumatic stress disorder, but also have traumatic brain injuries. The IEDs that went off over there, the concussions of all these weapons that you're exposed to for this long period of time damages your brain. Your computer, like I said, my computer, it doesn't run like everyone else's computer. It's different. And not only teaching the public how to deal with that, it's teaching the veterans how to deal with that as well.
100%, man. And I tell you what, there's a lot that you covered right there that I want to dig into. I'm taking notes during this podcast because I'm loving the conversation we're having. So one of the things that you said initially is like, you weren't prepared. You went over there probably with an expectation of what I'm going to be serving. We're going to go over there. We're going to get the bad guys. We're going to do the right thing. We're going to save people, save lives. Like, we're doing the right thing. And then a worldview gets shattered, right? And now you experience the reality of the experience. And it's probably far from that initial vision. So now there's a huge disconnect, you know what I mean? And then you see that in a lot of things in life, where if someone has a super strongly held worldview or illusion, and then that illusion is shattered with a reality, they like struggle to come to terms with this, because it's like their story in their head was not that. And now you're having to live in this new experience. And it's like, how do you make this right? Is this okay? Would you make the same choices? Would you do things differently? Should you be there? Should you not be? Should you be in a leadership position? Like, I can see in your eyes already, you said it, like, listen, I shouldn't have been a leadership. You're almost viewing yourself as you were brainwashed to be like, well, you're this guy, get over there and you're in charge and they can all depend on you. And you're like, I haven't even got my stuff together yet. I'm trying to learn from this experience as I go. And another thing that which is always shocking to me is like, so you have a certain mission and it's clearly defined in your brain. Like, exactly, to this day, you remembered exactly how to say that terrorist man's name like that. Like, that mission was on the forefront of your brain, and that was what was driving your actions. In today's age, we have the most unbelievable intel in the world. I don't understand how we can't find somebody like this, know exactly where they are, put the right people together, take care of it. Why are we kicking in doors and is he in here? Do we have to torment these people? You know, because that could be just a James and an Anton over there with our families that happen to be in a tough situation. How in the world is the intel not at a level where, I mean, we have satellites that in the 90s could read, a stamp on a letter, and we don't know exactly where these people are? That's another thing that I kind of struggle with, because I mean, I guess there's so much to unpack here in the stuff that you said, but did you feel that the intel that you were like, God, how can I phrase this correctly? When you're on those missions, did it make sense afterwards and at the time? Like, at the time and when you reflect back, were you doing the right thing?
Right. Yes, that's a great question. Was I doing the right thing or the wrong thing? And it's all a matter of perspective at that point, right? Our intel world is very good. We have intel assets that are far better than what anybody else has on the planet, period.
That's what I would just think. Right? It would be so easy.
But intel is human-driven, and humans create errors. And there's we can have the best satellites in the world, the best assets in place, and if all those pieces don't fall together, you're not going to complete the mission. I think people they think more that we should have Bin Laden. We should have just been able to figure out what cave he was hiding in. I mean, he was hanging out in plain sight for years, right?
His brother's like hanging out in Washington D.C. with our politicians. Like, we have intel on the family. We should know.
Right. Having the capabilities of producing intelligence and acting on that intelligence are two different things. And you got to remember, just because you have a piece of intelligence doesn't necessarily mean it's actionable. And by actionable meaning, there are always higher ups in the system that are controlling these decisions, right? And that's where I think that's where it gets sticky is leadership. Either we have weak leadership or leadership that isn't capable of acting on good intelligence, and that just trickles down all the way from the top to the bottom. So intel is a finicky animal, in my opinion.
So we can leave that topic. It's just something that's always been frustrating me. Like you're wanting me to believe that Bin Laden is just in a cave orchestrating this grand, operation and all these things, and it just seems detached from reality. Because like I don't know. Maybe I'm completely wrong. It seems detached from reality.
We're very good though. We have capabilities in this country that would shock people.
Oh yeah, I mean that's what I mean. So if I only know a small degree of what we are capable of, then why in the world is our efficiency not extremely through the roof? That's like the question. But leaving that aside, would you say that like your worldview was shattered and that was where a lot of the disconnect was at, and you probably didn't process those things while you were there? Like you said, man, to this day you haven't processed the loss of that person that you cared about very deeply. You know what I mean? Because like, I mean, that's always the reality. If you go to war, the person next to you or you could lose your life in that process. But it's like you're probably so focused on just like, we're going to go fight and be together and we got our team and we're going to, like, you're probably not thinking about those things as much until it takes place. Like,
There was this sense of, I'm going to lay my life down for this country and wave the flag for me, guys, and send me on my way. And the reality is, the second that first RPG blew up over my head when I landed in Iraq, I said, screw this place. I want to go home. That's the reality. And anybody that doesn't tell you the same is lying to you.
Well,
It's survival. That's what it's about.
that makes perfect sense. When you're sitting around a bonfire and you're drunk and your American songs are playing and you're going, I'll go over there and fight and I'll represent. That sounds great. Just like people that come in and say like, oh, I could be a fighter. Until you're getting a cage door shut and going, oh, Jesus, or until you actually have to step up to the challenge, then it's a completely different animal. So, and it's life or death for you. It's not a competition. It's not a game. It's like, you see that explosion? That could have been your body. Mm-hmm. So that's an extreme shock. That's like, oh my God, this is real. And now, like you said, fight or flight is, I have to protect this at all costs and these people around at all costs. So, if something is a threat to me, I have to neutralize it, and that's a crazy way to live. So you have more in this story that I think, you also get an extreme weight put on your shoulders at a really young age, where like your brain's not even fully formed yet. You're trying to figure out the world. And now all of a sudden you're leading people through a life or death situation where, a bad call, a bad decision could be the loss of someone you care for very deeply. Like I could see it in your eyes when you said like it almost affects your soul. Of course it would. Like, I mean, these are people you make human beings. We enjoy this experience better when we attach to other people, when we resonate with someone and we're like, man, like this is a person, like you see, like that's a person, I'm a person, we're in this thing together, and then they're gone. It's just like when someone commits suicide, a lot of times family members or friends will carry that burden. Like, this is my fault. Like, what could I have done different? And only through like therapy or like working through your mind do you realize that like you can't hold blame like that, but those are extremely difficult process. My mother committed suicide, and a girlfriend of 2.5 years, like the first woman I fell in love with, I thought I was going to marry. Like, I had a troubled thing from my mom, and I was like, well, this is like, we're going to get this thing together. She committed suicide. My parents made me move across the country. We tried to make long distance relationship work. She was ultra depressed. She committed suicide. So struggling with the idea that like, that's my fault. That was a difficult battle for a long period of time, because as good human beings, I think your heart is just like, there's something I could have done. You almost have military veterans experiencing that exact same thing, right? Would you say that's relatable?
Absolutely, I would say that's relatable. Guilt, I think guilt is probably the number one symptom that I have talked to veterans about that leads to suicidal ideations. It is, as a soldier, you're trained to respond to things, right? And you're trained to be a part of this team. And these are your family members. And when one of them decides to take their lives, there's a letdown of the team, I think, is what the rest of the, that person is obviously no longer affected by that decision, but it's those who are left behind that I believe does the most damage. Um, I think when people are contemplating, as a suicide survivor myself, um, contemplating that decision it's actually a very selfish decision, and when I say selfish, I don't mean that to sound harsh. I mean that
Well, you are not considering the way your actions are going to impact all the people around you. You know what I mean? Like, and you might be thinking like, I'm a burden on others. This is actually going to make their life easier. This is going to make they won't have to put up with anymore. They won't have to deal with my problems. But nobody thinks of it like that. Like, the person that is contemplating the suicide does not see that in the eyes of their loved ones or in the people that are around them, you're not a burden at all. They just may not know what to do to help you. They may not know how to step up. But like, the worst thing that the thing they don't want more than anything would be the loss of your life. So the brain is a scary thing. It's a wonderful thing or a terrifying thing. And it can get attached to ideas that are just not real, and it can believe in them fully and then chase them into the abyss. You know what I mean? It gets to the point where it's like, this is the better decision. Life will be better without me. And that's just not real.
You're correct. You're attempting to solve a problem, I believe. And what's interesting about it to me when I look back is the most basic thing that our brain processes at the end of the day is survival. Its most basic form, our animal instincts are there to ensure we can survive, right? And the fact that human beings are able to make a decision to override that, it's so powerful when I look back on it. Like, you have folks that will attempt suicide as a call for help, right? They don't necessarily want to die, but they're trying, and me, I wanted to die. There was no doubt about it. I was looking to end the show. Thank God it didn't happen. It should have happened, and that's given me truly a second chance. And veterans, we see it as I think almost to a point as a mission. When you get to that decision in your life, you're trying to help the team out, and you want to end this problem, this burden that you've laid upon your family, your friends, your career, and it becomes almost mission driven, I believe, among the veteran population, and the way that it's contemplated and done. It's either one of two ways. You either have the folks that have made these plans and have pondered this, and it's a mission to them, and then there's the very impulsive, often under the influence of alcohol or other substances. It's very impulsive, and that's what I wish we could get to, and that's really a symptom. Impulsivity is a symptom of post-traumatic stress as well. So their disease is just creating this snowball effect.
100%, man. And what people have to realize is, like, it's psychological damage in general leads to bad perspective or bad patterns of thought or bad patterns of behavior that generally cause more problems and more chaos, which leads to like it's almost like a vicious snowball rolling down a hill that gets worse and worse and worse. And then you don't just see this in veterans. You see this in people that were sexually abused. You see this in people that were physically abused. You see this in people that were like just trauma. Let's make it broad. Trauma affects the brain very harshly. You know what I mean? And if you don't process that trauma correctly, and you don't create perspective, and you don't find ways for forgiveness, find ways to detach from responsibility, like the idea of like, I should have done this, I could have done that. Yeah, maybe from the perspective you sit with today, you would have. And you know what? You should almost acknowledge that that's tremendous progress. If the person that sits here today would have done things differently, you are evolving, you are getting better, you're leveling up. But trauma is a wild thing.
And yes, trauma is tremendously complex because we have, take veterans for example, we have the trauma of military service, whatever that may be. But we have veterans who bring generational trauma. That's a whole nother aspect to their lives, that this trauma that I still remember hearing the stories from back home in Palestine. It was horrible, and we have carried these traumas in my family for generations, and then that gets passed down to a soldier, and then they get themselves into a situation with military service, and then they experience the trauma of war or whatever that service entailed, and then they come home, and then they experience the trauma of ruined relationships, decimated support systems, and then they are re-traumatized when they seek help, and then they go out to the Veterans Administration looking for help, and they're re-traumatized by that organization because there's no relief that can be brought to that situation. And so trauma, at that point, it's just a layer upon layer of trauma.
And then it literally restarts the cycle, because now all that trauma, unless you really are one of the few people that get it all together and reattach to purpose and turn your life around and can inspire and lead in a better direction, you're going to carry that same trauma that the previous generations carried to the next generation, which will then lead to another person having to, in your case, which we're about to get to, went the right way. But for a lot of people, it doesn't. They become a statistic. It ends there. You know what I mean? So it's like, trauma in general, this culture doesn't spend a lot of time working on our minds. We don't self-reflect. We don't analyze our thoughts. We don't try to look back at past experiences and create better perspectives and like things that happened to you when you were a child that you think is your fault, that you carry this heavy weight and this burden. Whereas, like, if you could, with a clear mind, if you got a sense of clarity, you detach from the emotions of the situation and you looked at things objectively, like, let's pretend it wasn't you, it was a random person X, and you can restructure the way that you carry these things, we could make tremendous change on our families, on our lives, on the generations to come. But, like, it's not cool in this society, right? Like, mental health is just now starting to be a mainstream conversation.
We've built these social constructs put in place that are just not conducive to good mental health, correct? We have constructs put in place by religion. We have constructs put in place by politics. We have set up a system that is simply not conducive for trauma to be healed, because a lot of that trauma, it still hasn't been recognized by, look at our older generation. It was a taboo subject, and it was suck it up and move on. And what we've done is it's damaged our brains as a society, and we haven't come up with a legitimate way to address these issues. And it's taken 22 veterans a day to commit suicide to get to a point where we even admit it's a problem. We haven't come up with a solution yet. There is no solution. Every day, I just heard of a person this morning that I knew committed suicide. Like, it's sad because it's become commonplace to hear this. It doesn't affect me as the way it did before, which bothers me.
Yeah, it's almost like you need a complete society shift where people recognize how delicate the mind is, and we create better systems and processes to help people reorganize thoughts, experiences, and all of these things. And maybe we are seeing this cultural shift slowly, because now we are talking about it. At least men are able to admit, like, man, I have vulnerabilities and problems and pain and struggle, versus like back in the day, like you said, it was just like, tuck it down, dude, like push that stuff down and be a man. You know what I mean? And like that leads to really unhealthy psychologies, which tends to harm other people. That's like the other thing that you have to realize if you're one of those, like, I just tough it out people. Maybe you can, maybe. But there are a lot of those people that just tough it out, that go around damaging so many people around them because you're not emotionally stable. And I don't mean that like you're a psychopath. I mean that like you haven't created a healthy psychology that allows you to interact with the world in a positive way so that you radiate good energy. You make people's lives better. You're not the person screaming at your family because some little inconvenience took place. Like,
emotional intelligence is not something that's very prevalent in our culture. It's not. I think emotional intelligence is coming to light, and we're realizing that truth and fact and what we used to see as truth, it doesn't exist anymore. We're now at a place to where a person's perspective is truth, and
which is not real.
Is not, but
it's real to you. But that is when you create divisive lines and you no longer communicate with people that have different perspectives than you. That's why this is so dangerous. Yes. If you think your perception is the truth, right, then you instantly discredit anyone else that doesn't believe what you believe. And that stops the ability to progress. That is why we have a First Amendment. That's why we're supposed to have challenging dialogue. That's why we're supposed to mine for conflict, is because through dialogue, especially if we grant respect and I take in what you're saying and I consider it, and I don't just say I have a predetermined, belief system that tells me that you're wrong. So sorry, I went off quickly on that, but I don't like that idea that like your perception it's on a scale. Let's say the truth is here and one perspective is here and one is here. The truth may be much closer to someone's perception, but whatever you perceive does not automatically correlate to the truth, right? So you need to be able to look at your ideas and your opinions and your worldviews and your dialogues and say, I may be wrong. Mm-hmm. And even just being able to say that, I may be wrong, leads to progress. Maybe these pharmaceutical drugs that I'm loaded up on that my doctor tells me is the answer, maybe that's not right. Maybe the way that I'm lashing out at all these people saying that I don't have a problem, maybe I need help. Just being able to admit that you could be wrong is a very powerful thing.
And that goes against everything that Americans believe in. We want to be right. America,
the ego.
Baby. America, baby.
I'm always right. We're number one. I win at everything.
Until we settle on, as a society, until we settle on what this truth, especially when it comes to mental health, politics aside, whatever that is, everybody, that doesn't matter as far as I'm concerned, because until we solve the mental health crisis, none of that other stuff matters.
I'll tell you right now, if we get people that are better human beings, that have healthier psychologies, that are more willing to connect with each other and show compassion and empathy and understanding and not just divisive lines, we're going to have a better culture, which will yield better results in every field. So if you hate the political system, but you're the person that is, my truth is real and I'm right, and these are the terrible left or the terrible right, or whichever side you align yourself to, you're still part of the problem, because we should be working towards coming together more. It's painted on the gym wall out there. It says we are all one, and I hang the flags of every nation. If you walk out there, you're gonna see flags. The Iraqi flag is hanging out there, and the American flag is in the row next to it. You know what I mean? And there's no reason for it to be different. And that's against a lot of what we're taught. It's probably easier to go kill people in another place if you're the bearers of truth and your perspective is real, and et cetera.
For me, my perspective, what's really brought a shift in the way I think has been traveling the world.
Same.
This last April, I traveled to Egypt, and it was one of the most eye-opening experience I've had, because for me personally, I knew it was going to be triggering. I haven't been to a predominantly Muslim country since Iraq, right? And it was during Ramadan that we went, and it was such a loving, open experience to watch these folks who had nothing, literally nothing, living in the streets, putting out what little bit of food they had for their community and scraping together pennies to give to their neighbor. And this is a place that many perceive as violent, as a place, whoa, you don't want to travel there. And I got to have tea with the grandson of the little boy who discovered King Tut's tomb, right? These experiences, and to hear their stories and to hear their perception and to hear their perception of Americans was eye-opening, because there's a lot of work we can do to make ourselves more culturally open. We kind of paint ourselves as this big melting pot, and we accept everybody, and we don't. I mean, that's just the fact, right? As a culture, we may try, and that may be a goal, that may be our hope, but it's just not the facts. And traveling and experiencing, going down to South America. I've been to Peru, and what a wonderful culture that was. That was my life actually was changed in Peru, and so world travel for me has helped, and it's allowed me to bring these experiences back home and talk with folks that are not willing to either shift their perspective, which isn't necessarily required, but at the very least have a conversation and understand, even if you don't agree with it. That is what makes you emotionally intelligent.
And really, you're seeing similarities in people, whether they live in Egypt or have this skin color or this belief system. That's a human being that grew up in the world, that's trying to find their way, that hopefully is on a scale from good to bad, and there's good to bad of every color, of every social status, of every religious beliefs, of everything, right? So you go like, these are human beings. So when you start to look at people more that way, it makes the world easier to understand.
We've discounted the human experience, I believe. As a society, we discount others' experience. We refuse to recognize that, like you said, these are people living the human experience to the best of their ability, whatever that may be.
It's just so much easier, I think, for people that don't do in-depth thought to be like, oh, terrorists came from this area and of this thing, they must be bad people. That is as absurd as, just recently in America, we were pushing an ideology, even on the media, all cops are bastards, while asking people not to stereotype against people. Mm-hmm. That is the quintessential stereotype. All, anything, are anything. That is stereotyping at the fullest. It's the quintessential example, right? So we need to get out of the emotions, get out of the dumb stuff, get back to being human beings, right? And start having more, that's literally the reason this podcast was created. And it's called, my last name is Gray, so it worked for the gray area, because there's black, white, right? We need to figure out how to work together in this area, right? So, and I feel like you and I can talk about the human experience forever and all these things, and I really want to get to your story about when you came back. So everyone that's listening to the podcast to this point, you had a lot of struggles, you had worldview shattered, you had extreme weight of leadership put on your shoulders. You went into this experience because you thought oh, I look up to my grandfather, he's a great man, and he was a firefighter and he's a military, so that's what I'm going to do, because your love for him put you in this situation. So now you find yourself in an experience that maybe you didn't belong in, you know what I mean? And now you're coming back, and all of a sudden it's hey, get back to normal life, keep yourself together, and good luck. I want you to talk about when you came back, what type of psychological state you were in, because sometimes people kind of lie to themselves or hide from themselves, and they're I'm good, I'll make it work, and then quickly the wheels start falling off. What were you like when you first came back? And then the dialogue that we were having before this podcast is where I want to lead into, where did the treatment first start? What did that lead to? What did your life end up looking like? And then we'll get to the point where you hit your rock bottom. And then I want to start shifting to the part where you're at now to give people hope about what you found that has changed your life, and the way you've been able to break free from, dependency on a lot of things that were going to kill you. Mm-hmm. So let's, the floor is yours.
Sure. So when I came back, I didn't know what type of treatment I needed. I didn't know what was really going on with my brain. I was never a drinker. I was never...
really quick. You got discharged medically.
Yes.
Was this due to psychological thing? Why did they discharge you? Because I never asked you that.
Yeah, it was a combination. Yeah, basically post-traumatic stress. And my guts got all messed up, like gastrointestinal stuff, which was caused by the psychological stuff. I mean, look, psychological problems, especially post-traumatic stress, causes chronic pain. It causes our gut is our second brain, right? My guts revolted on me for years, and again, they just throw medication at you to try and symptomatically solve things. So when I came back, I got into some therapy. I started taking some medication, but I needed a job. So what did I do? I jumped right back into the frying pan and went to work as a federal civilian employee. So I worked for a few different federal agencies and put myself right back into a stressful, traumatic situation for about 9 years. I put myself through that. I did various different jobs throughout various different agencies in the government. And in 2013, it was I got hurt during a training accident, and it hurt my neck. It was a neck injury, and that's really when the problems started. Then I started having chronic headaches, and my depression was worsening. My anxiety was worsening. I was worried about my career ending. I had a family to support. I had all these things that kind of piled on. And the only answer at that point was the medication route. I had sought out a pain specialist because I was having these debilitating headaches. It was causing I wasn't able to work for a while, and that's really where the journey into the opiates happened. It was kind of shocking. I remember my first appointment with my doctor. He told me, he said, okay, well, we can take you down two routes. We can take you down the procedure route. We'll stick you with a bunch of needles and epidurals and all that jazz, or we could take you down the medicine route. And that, I think those words there, that is really what changed my life, because I said, well, I don't want to get shots and shit. No, I'll take the medicine. And I walked out of there with 9 different medications that day, mostly opiate based. And as
don't skip over that, because that is first of all, like when you said that, I was like, what? Like 9 different medications. Okay, so you have a neck injury, which is causing pain. So obviously, like, you have to treat the pain to some degree, otherwise you probably can't even function. How does that jump to 9 medications, right? Do you remember what they were?
Oh yeah, at that point, I walked out with the prescriptions, and it's a good point to say a stack of coupons too, right? So this is it started off now. I had come from no medications. I was taking nothing. I walked out of there with a prescription for Oxycontin, which is morphine sulfate, 2 different what was it? The Tramadol, which was on the opiate scale, was kind of one of the lower ones, but for the extended release and the immediate release, and muscle relaxers, and there were a few other things they tossed into there. But that was just a first appointment. There was a month later.
That's why I was so shocked.
Yeah.
You literally said the first appointment I walked out with 9 medications. I mean, these things all can have side effects. These all things can create more issues.
The second appointment, I said, hey, I still have headaches, right? My head still hurts. And then it was, well, we could bump you up to Dilaudid. Okay, well, but we can give you Dilaudid for the extended pain, and I can give you Oxy for the breakthrough pain, which breakthrough I didn't even realize until recently. I was watching this show called Dope Sick on Hulu, and the way they're talking, how this term breakthrough pain was kind of coined by Big Pharma, right? But I bought into it because I figured, well, shoot, it makes sense. My pain medicine's going to wear off. I got to throw something on top of that, right?
They're actually using that right now with the current things that are going on, breakthrough cases. Apparently, that's just a term we like to use now, but it's like, hey, it broke through. Like, this should have done the job, but it broke through, so why don't you go ahead and take this now?
And then it spiraled. From there, it was, I said, I got to be honest, I'm still hurting. Because really these opiates they weren't addressing the pain, right? So eventually I was on the fentanyl patch. So I had a fentanyl patch that initially was prescribed. You were supposed to put a patch on every 3 days. And then I said, well, I don't feel like this is working. So then it was change it every 2 days. You must be using the medication up quicker. We'll give you more fentanyl. And then it was, here's some oxy for your breakthrough pain. And then they had this medication called Nucenta, which was it's like a morphine derivative. So I was on the fentanyl, the oxy, the morphine. And then I said, well, I'm having trouble sleeping. So then, well, here's some Ambien. And I said, well, I feel a little bit anxious. And then it was, here's some Xanax. And I'm still feeling anxious. So here's some Seroquel and some Celexa and some Effexor. And then there's this wonderful little drug called Wellbutrin, which really threw me into a tizzy. So this stuff, I told, after all these medications, I said, I don't have any energy, right? I have no energy to do anything. They said, well, we can give you a little pick-me-up. So they prescribed this, it's like an antidepressant called Wellbutrin. And in some people, they have like an adverse reaction to where it's like meth in your system. It is horrible. It almost turns you manic, right? And this is what's happening. It really put me down a path to where I was basically speedballing. I mean, if you look at it, and I didn't know. I'd never abused the medications. I always took them as prescribed.
Real quick though, how old are you at this time of your life? Because I picture like your upper 20s or early 30-year-old man on this many medications. Like, is this supposed to be just like well, now you're on this routine? Because like, it's going to change your brain chemistry. You're going to be dependent upon these substances. Like, what was when you were in that stage of your life, what was the end goal? Like what was, where was this going to lead?
Honestly, I don't know. I was 30. I was 30 at the time.
30 years old. Because it's like, in my world, like if someone gets injured, I mean, especially in 20s or 30s, like you're going to just get up, maybe you need surgery. You might need physical rehab. But like you're going to heal up. The human body heals itself. Like you're going to need some sort of procedure and you're going to be good. We're going to get you back on your feet. You're in a cycle that almost like if you can't see disaster, I mean, I'm sure now you can look back, but like if that doctor couldn't see a 30-year-old man in front of him on all of these drugs, seeing that they're like, this person is destined for disaster. What?
He always had coupons. There were always new coupons to try different things. And it got to the point to where I remember he had a coupon for, Narcan's a relatively like cheap medication, but it got to the point to where they had some, it was some expensive, it was like $600, right? But he had a coupon for it. And he's like, well, I think you should start carrying around some, it got to the point where he wanted me to carry Narcan in my pocket because I was on so many opiates, right? But what happened, thank God, my stomach stopped working at a certain point. The opiates basically became so toxic in my system. I developed this. It's called gastroparesis. So now I couldn't eat. I would just throw up all over the place because the vagus nerve in my stomach was poisoned, basically, right? So
and we got to go deep into this, but like, so you're being poisoned as a treatment. Does anyone not see a huge issue with this? Like, you have headaches and a neck pain that's being caused by something. And maybe it's even psychological. Maybe the brain and trauma and all these things have not processed the damage and it's causing. Anxiety comes from the brain. People can manifest illness. People can, there's a lot of things but like, you're a man with headaches and a neck issue that is poisoning himself to the point that it'll make your body eventually start failing. But that's treatment?
Well, it gets to the point, too, once you're that deep down the rabbit hole, now you are dependent, physically dependent. There's no way out of that. And even when my stomach issues started, that was a blessing. Thank God I got the stomach.
I was thinking that as you were saying that. I was honestly, thank God, because if someone doesn't pull the plug on that, you're going to disastrously fail.
There was one moment I do remember. I was prescribed to Oxycontin, which is a hot button topic nowadays too, right? So between the fentanyl and the Dilaudid, I think they had me on Oxycontin. And there was one time, the first time I took that stuff, I said, "Uh-oh, you're ODing." Like I laid down and I said, "That's the wrap," right? And I woke up 8 hours later and I was fine. But you get to the point to where now you're dependent on it, and you don't really. At that point, I was the closest thing to a zombie life form that you can have in a human being. I was not me. I was at this point, my family life was declining. I have 2 children. I wasn't a very good example to them.
Are you just like on cruise control at that point? Because I've never been on any medications or things like when you wake up in the morning and then you take all these pills. Are you analyzing what your life looks like, or what should be, or like how you're like? Because obviously I don't take any prescription drugs or anything like that. But I'm like, how would the self, like the part of you that knows who you are and what you would not recognize, like this is disastrous. Like, what am I doing? What do you even think about it at that time?
That was the time when the suicidal ideations really. Yeah, I had a death wish at that point. I just, like you said, cruise control. I said, hey, we're gonna run this until the wheels fall off, essentially. And when the wheels fall off, I don't care, because I wasn't myself. My personality. I was not. I was a chemically induced life form, just roaming the world. You know what I mean? And it
Dude, this is terrifying. Like, this is like Antoine, the young kid that had aspirations for the world and dreams, and like just the human being, like contained in a prison cell that people don't realize, because you're in this state that you can't escape unless you get to an extreme shift. You know what I mean? And it's terrifying to listen to the story, and because I always try to put myself into someone else's perspective. That's crazy.
And I try and put out there, like, I've never been diagnosed with any type of substance abuse issue. I didn't abuse any of those substances. I took them exactly as my doctor prescribed them to me, right? At no point did I take more than I needed to, or take it in not a manner that it wasn't prescribed. But really, it was January 1st of 2016 was when I said, this is D-Day, that's it. And I took that fentanyl patch off, and I flushed those damn oxy pills.
Is this before or after your suicide attempt, though?
This is before my suicide attempt.
So you said, you know what? New year, I know this shit is ruining my life. I'm done.
Yeah, the VA, I had an appointment on, I want to say January 3rd or something, but I had the appointment to go in and get the Suboxone. They said, hey, we want to, if you want, you can come in and get the Suboxone, and that'll get you off the opiates, right? But in reality, Suboxone is an opiate. And Suboxone withdrawal, if you talk to people who've been through it, is worse than the Oxy or many of the other opiates that people take. So I said, you know what, we're going to just do this the old-fashioned way. And I took the patch off, I dumped the Oxy, and I laid down on the couch. And for me, the first symptom was the runny nose. When my nose started to run, I knew, you better get this shit into your system, or you're going to be miserable, right? And it took about 2 weeks, and it was terrifying, horrifying. At that point, I think we told you before, I couldn't have killed myself if I wanted to. I was too weak. My ex-wife had to come over and drop the pills into my mouth because I couldn't hold a glass of water, right? So it took about 2 weeks, and after that experience, the what's called post-acute withdrawal syndrome kicked in. And essentially, when you come off of all these medications, your brain hasn't, the dopamine and all the feel-good stuff has been replaced by these opiates. It doesn't have the ability to make you feel good on its own yet. It takes a while to kick in. And the depression that followed was, I don't even know how to describe it, like time. It was like 1 minute felt like an hour, if that makes sense. And you're just sitting there and you're hurting because you don't have the ability to feel almost anything, really. And that took a couple of months to really, before I started to feel my brain kicked in and started producing some of these chemicals to make me feel good. But this was prior to my suicide attempt, because the opiates were, and I haven't touched an opiate since then, not one. They terrify me now looking back, because I don't remember. But 2016, 17, it was a tough time, right? So, and I get these glimpses of what my life was like and what I went through, and it scares the shit out of me. I don't know how the hell I survived it, but I did. Sitting in my basement in the funk that I was in, tuned off to the world, and just with a death wish at that, really at that point, because even after I got off the opiates, I was still working for the government at this time, right? And they were just, it was a miserable experience. What the government had put me through, the way they were treating me, because I was sick, right? I was sick. I was out of work for a while, and the way the government treats sick people is to they don't even treat them like humans half the time, right? You're nothing to them. So from the time from January 16 until October 31st of 16 was actually my suicide attempt. I think I had gone through this kind of reawakening to where I was off all this medication. I was trying to feel good, but I was still struggling. And that's where I think it got worse. This reality in my mind that if I could just kick all these opiates, I can get back on track. The family will be happy, the wife will be happy, the kids will be happy, the boss will be happy, everyone's happy. We'll just go on with what we're doing, and that wasn't the case, right? So, well, now I need more medication.
Well, you still have to confront that massive demon, that huge beast, the real thing that's living in your mind that, the opiates may have distracted you from, and everything. It's like you just never opened that door. So it was like, hey, if I can just get these opiates, not remembering that like all of that shit's in place because of the damage that's in there that you haven't encountered yet. It's like the final boss fight in a video game, you know what I mean? Like until you fight that battle, you're never going to find that sense of peace and fulfillment and purpose and yada yada.
I was not emotionally intelligent. My emotional intelligence level was not where it should have been.
To be honest, though, it's not a shock. Like you said, our culture, you were a soldier. You were meant to be this and that. You weren't the person that had to think like, what if I'm a victim of my own mind and my thoughts? And I have, not even a victim, but like I have to battle through this extremely uncomfortable, vulnerable, difficult, painful, crippling experience. But by doing so, I can come out on the other side and actually have a life that matters to me. You know what I mean?
That's true. And unfortunately, it doesn't always work out that way. When things leading up to my suicide attempt, I try and kind of put my finger on what was it, right? And again, I think the reality was I had a death wish for a while. Like I had stopped caring. I think that's probably the point where people really, once you stop caring for yourself and you stop loving yourself, there's no way you can love anybody else.
Do you think it's in some way related to like such a disconnect from who you are deep inside and like the person you were before all the pain and the trauma and everything? It's like there's so much shit stacked on that you're just not willing to go through the fight, and then like you don't have love for yourself anymore. Like what?
Yeah, I was a failure. I wasn't living up to the career,
what you were supposed to be,
what I was supposed to be. I wasn't living up to that. And really the reason I wasn't living up to what I was supposed to be was because of all these different traumatic experiences, right?
100%, which is not like that's like an easy truth to say today sitting here now, but like probably something that was extremely difficult to accept then. You know what I mean? Because you're the soldier, you're just supposed to be able to do it. Shut up and man up, you know what I mean? But no, of course, like it's not shocking. What you went through caused that damage, and that's why you were in the state that you were in. You don't have to judge yourself for it. You don't have to hold guilt for it. If you take anyone with a healthy psychology and you put them through extremely damaging, painful, emotional experiences, they can become someone that then all of a sudden is very detached from who they are.
And we have these, we can't forget the stigmas attached to a lot of this stuff. I'm extremely open about my story. As a suicide survivor, I view it as empowering, right? I am empowered that I survived this. I can understand what folks are going through, and I can empathize with that. But there is a stigma, I was worried like, oh shit, now that I have this suicide label, people are going to think I'm a dangerous person or that I'm just crazy. I would hope when people speak to me, they realize, I have issues that mentally I need to stay on top of, right? But I don't want to say mentally ill. I'm not mentally ill. There's a difference between people who have schizophrenia or bipolar or have that true mental illness. So I kind of try and be the example that there is a difference between post-traumatic stress, what I've been through, and schizophrenia or other mental illnesses, we kind of lump them all into the same thing.
It's vastly different. And like, this is a cause and effect thing. Like, this is, you have had to deal with all these things versus some people, like you said, like my mom was a diagnosed schizophrenic. Like, that is a brain disorder that is different. And we didn't know much about it back then. Like, back when my mother took her own life, they loaded her up with, I think Zoloft was the one that they did and all these other things. And then she committed suicide, but those are different issues. And I think when, like you said, when you realize that healthy, happy, good human beings can go through traumatic experiences and then have to battle through their mind with these mental things and realize that, like, that doesn't mean they're mentally ill. That doesn't mean that they're a lesser version. That doesn't mean they're any of these things. It's, had you gone through, maybe that's what it is. If people in culture looked at it and was like, you know what, had I gone through the same experiences, I very well may be having the same troubles. Then there's a compassion. Then there's an understanding. Never an understanding because you haven't actually gone through it, but at least wow, you can see the humanity. Like, that could be me on the other side of the table had I gone military and had Anton gone radio broadcast, and we could be having that same exchange.
In 2011, I had beat cancer. I had was diagnosed with testicular cancer and was. I look back on, like, cancer scares the shit out of me. I'm terrified that something else is going to come back, and you know what I mean, and I'm not going to be able to beat it. Point being is taking those two, where cancer is terrifying. It's a terrifying when they tell you this is what you got. Even though I was lucky, mine was very curable. But if I had to go at it again, I would take the cancer any day of the week over the struggles of not even necessarily what the mental illness or the PTSD brought on. It was the struggle to find help. And when I say help, I mean, like, support, true support. And it's not there. As a society, it's easier. With a lot of our veteran community, they want to keep us behind a curtain. If we keep these guys medicated, I tell a lot of folks that with the veterans, we're kind of like cobra snakes, right? Like, we slither around the jungle. We have to commingle with everybody, and a cobra snake isn't necessarily dangerous. But if you walk up and you smack him on the nose and he bites you, well, then that's your fault, right? So it's getting the message out that we're not all dangerous and we're not out to hurt people, and we're just trying to experience this life to the best we can. And oftentimes it's not very good for folks.
It is terrifying when you think about it that way, that it's almost like maybe the system is in place that, like, because listen, we were talking about this before the podcast. If you're a doctor and you're prescribing someone all of these medications and they're loaded up 24/7 and they're a walking zombie, a shell of who they should be, not dealing with any of their issues, going from moment to moment until the symptoms of all these medications eventually cause your body to fail and put you into a worse state, you're not helping that person. You're not loving that person. You're not trying to, you're almost just like, you're just treating a symptom and hoping that some miracle takes place. But as a society, we're not putting processes in place to really try to bring these people back to healthy psychologies, because it's a difficult thing. Mm-hmm. And that, one of the things that I think that is super hard, regardless of who you found that wants to help, it is in their own mind. You can provide support. You can provide maybe answers or therapy. You can provide brotherhood. You can provide loving relationships. But that person still has to want to fight the battle inside.
That's true.
If they don't want to take on the demon themselves, you know what I mean? Like, there's a certain helplessness to the fact that no matter how much you love someone, you want to help somebody, you want to give them the best, if they're not willing to fight that battle, there might be nothing you can do. And that's a terrifying reality.
You're 100% correct. Yeah. No matter what we do to address the problem, there's always going to be statistics. But at the end of the day, as a society, we need to ask ourselves, did we do everything we could to help that person? And unfortunately, the answer right now is no. So
100%. So I want to talk about, you found out that you're, in a zombie state, you try to get off it, which is unbelievable that you cold turkeyed all those things and just, you weren't, what's weird that I found about a lot of the people that actually turn their lives around and they become ultra successful, they're willing to endure physical pain and suffering and like I can get through this, but it's the emotional and mental pain that they avoid at all costs. Because and that's reflected in your story. Really, there was a battle that had to take place in there through some really painful shit and some acceptance. Like you said to me earlier in this podcast, to this day, I haven't accepted one of the close people that passed away. Those battles we don't want to fight ever. We'll endure pain. If someone told you, hey, if you take a bullet to the shoulder and the leg, everything's going to be fine, you're going to live a happy family, you'd be like, yo, shoot me right now, right? 100%. We're willing to endure that. But the psychological pain is very different. So you're a shell of yourself. You choose to break off the opiates, but then you still have that demon to fight. It leads to the lowest point in your life, which we can talk about that to any depth that you would like, just to make the listeners understand. Because like I said, veterans that hear this, you have a light at the end of the tunnel story. And that's important, because sometimes you might not see that light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, hitting rock bottom for me was, I lost my career. Right, I've been retired now 5 years. I've been out of the workforce, and I think the struggle on top of all that's psychological, the demons and all that stuff. The worst thing you can do to a veteran is take their sense of purpose away. Once you have lost your sense of purpose, your sense of service, there's nothing more at that point to live for, right? And I went through that, and the thought of having to reinvent myself wasn't necessarily on my mind at the time. I was focused on the loss of all this the career that I put all this work into, this loss. I mean, I was serving my country, and now I'm not, and I'm this, so the loss of sense of purpose was that was the bottom. Sitting at home, locked in my damn bedroom, just withdrawn and cut off from the world. Not talking with your friends, not talking with your family. Just at that point, I was just looking for some relief. You know what I'm saying? Any type of relief. I'm not a drinker. If I did, I can only imagine if I had gone down that road. But as we discussed earlier, for me, the big thing was, and growing up through the government, in the military, and medical cannabis was for me was the natural choice at that point. I didn't know much about it, right? I had never smoked weed until I was in my 30s. Never tried it, right? I never tried it. It was the boogeyman. It was a taboo subject, the gateway drug, all the bad shit, right? That was my perspective at that time, until I hit rock bottom, and there were no more pills to swallow. There were no more shrinks to talk to. There were no more doctors to see.
Sounds like it was a gateway drug to a better life for you. It was the exact opposite, because most people would say, oh, well, once, we were conditioned as children to believe that once you did marijuana, you were going to fall into heavy drugs and destroy your life and all the lives of the people around you. You used marijuana to break free to a better future and existence, where you're able to treat and handle a lot of the things that you deal with. And it was a gateway to the better life.
I couldn't eat. I tell you, with my gastro problems, I could not eat without throwing up, right? That was really why I initially tried it, was because there was a doctor, thank God, that said, maybe this will make you hungry. And I'll never forget, I went and got my medical card, and I didn't even know what to do with this stuff, right? I got this, and I looked at it, and what the hell is this? And yeah, exactly. I got this little pipe thing, and I took a couple of hits, and about 5 minutes later, my stomach started growling. I said, holy shit, I'm hungry. I said, wait, my neck, my neck doesn't hurt me. And I was cool, I was calm. I was ready to chill and listen to some music, right? And essentially, it at that point relieved much of the suffering I had, and it boggled my mind. I wanted to understand this issue from a socioeconomic perspective, from a medical perspective, from a cultural perspective. What is this wonderful plant now that has been brought to us? And thank God, and we're lucky to be in Michigan. That's a legal state. The prohibitionists are still out there in full force, even though it's illegal in the state of Michigan. We're fighting the legislator right now. They're trying to amend our medical laws, and the joy that it's brought to me personally, it's made me a better father. It's It's made me a better citizen. It's made me a better veteran. It's brought me a sense of peace. Not even the cannabis itself, the culture, the wonderful culture we have here in the state of Michigan, is really, it's a grassroots culture, and that I found my purpose. Right, I found my purpose. I needed to get this message out to other veterans that who, mind you, in the veteran community are still very leery of cannabis use, because there's really no more, as veterans, we are defined by two things, really, our service and disability. Those are the two things. When you think of a veteran, disability kind of defines us as a group, right? Yet there is no more group of individuals connected to the government than the veterans. The federal government, which is still illegal, right? We have veterans worried about losing their benefits. We have veterans worried about a myriad of things. We have veteran retirees. If you're drawing a military pension, you're still technically under the UCMJ. You're not supposed to touch it. So I try and be the example of, look, I say fuck them, right? I mean, that's really, I say fuck them, because the government people aren't the ones at home when you're sitting in your basement with, thoughts of ending your life. It ain't the government that's going to sit there and walk you through it, right? But some of the most compassionate and kind people I've ever come across in this world have been, and the best friends I've ever made have been over a joint. Some of the world's problems could be solved over smoking a joint, right? I mean, really, that's just fact. So my life kind of went from the bottom to, this new sense of purpose. And it's difficult for me. Like I said, I'm out of the workforce. So to interact with people and make those connections, it's difficult. And the community embraced me. The industry embraced me. And they brought me in and they wanted to listen to what I had to say. And it was about 2 years ago, I felt empowered to say, I want to get this message out. How can we do it? So I was never a social media guy, but I had gotten on Facebook and said, I'll give it a shot, right? And I started this group on Facebook called the Michigan Veterans for Cannabis Network. And the goal was to get as many industry people as we could into this group, and as many veterans as we could into the group, and promote employment to veterans in the cannabis space. It's a wonderful industry that has it's on track for $2 billion this year to raise, right? So there is room to involve our veterans, to provide them with employment, to provide them with medicine, to provide them with an outlet of how do we want responsible use. We want veterans to have good experiences with cannabis, right? And so I started that group, and it was overwhelming. The response was great. And it was earlier this year, I was contacted by a group called the Hero Poject. And the Hero Poject is the 501c3 veterans organization, which is the first in the country to essentially use legal cannabis dollars to support other veteran charities, right? And what it is, we're lucky again in this state to have legal cannabis. And what we had done is we've partnered, there's a consulting firm, Sparrow Consulting, Dan and Connie Sparrow. They had founded this thing called the Cannabis Social Equity Fund. So the issue with cannabis dollars, it's still federally illegal. You can't really do much with it, right? But there are banks in the state of Michigan who do accept cannabis dollars, right? Okay, so there's some credit unions and other banks. And once that money hits those accounts, those are legal dollars to use. So in partnership with the Cannabis Social Equity Fund, we were able to, they started up this organization, and the issue is these are all industry folks. There's no veterans that are on their board. So they reached out to me as kind of like a veteran advisor. And when I started this whole thing, it was eye-opening to me to see people want to help veterans, but at an arm's distance. They don't really want to help veterans. They want to say they helped veterans, right? Because it looks good. They want the PR oftentimes. But So we've created this organization that, with the cannabis industry in mind, they brand these. They're called Hero Poject products. So we deal with some hemp organizations. There's various cannabis organizations who will brand a line of their products, say some CBD chews or a brand of pre-rolls. They'll brand those as Hero Poject branded items, and then a portion, 10% or whatever the fee, whatever deal is worked out on that end, will then go into this Canada Social Equity Fund. And then as a board, we could, we have Vet Life, and there's all these different organizations that can use this money that are offering services directly to veterans. We are not offering these. We don't offer services. We want to be the piggy bank, right? And we want to be able to take those legal cannabis dollars that are just sitting there, ripe for the taking, and we want to get those into the hands of organizations that can directly translate those dollars into support for our veterans. So, it's been tricky too, because it's cannabis, trying to get people on board to donate, but also people that'll deal with us on the, that we're trying to provide these dollars to. There's still a lot of, they're very leery about cannabis. Can we support this? Is it a drug? Do we want to give veterans to offer a substance that can lead to substance abuse and all these? There's these issues. So it's kind of exciting to be on the ground floor of something that doesn't exist anywhere else in the country, and our board is staffed with good people who are trying to do good things. For me, the big thing was getting involved with good people. We could have probably, you could find an organization that'll give you $1 million, but are they good people, right? So this Hero Project, hopefully, we're hoping, it's taken off now. We launched on Memorial Day of this year, and I'm proud to be a part of it. I lend my opinion, and I advise these folks to the best that I can, to where I think the most veterans can be helped. And I think it's going to be these strategic partnerships with the right agencies, there's, I believe, 35,000 roughly veteran 501c3s that exist in our country. And there's like a minute portion of a percentage that are probably worth anything, right? And it's trying to find those organizations, number one, that will deal with you, and number that jive. We want they have to be cannabis friendly organizations, right? We don't want organizations to benefit if they're anti-cannabis, right? It doesn't make any sense. So right now we're partnering with different organizations that are at some point, we're in our fundraising process now. And through a grant writing process, interested organizations will be able to submit a grant application to us, which is then vetted and audited. And there's a certain criteria that the organization needs to meet. And then if the organization meets that criteria, as a board, they will vote, and then the funds would be dispersed to that organization. So it's a really new idea.
It's brilliant. I mean, because you're able to then do the work yourselves to make sure that these are going to places that you believe in, versus just, like you said, there's 35,000 things, but yet the statistics are higher than ever about veteran suicide and mental health issues. And we need to really find the people that are actually putting in the work with good hearts, trying to make a difference. Not people saying, hey, do you want to send some funding this way? No, we don't. And I almost laugh when you say, like, well, cannabis, it's a drug. Veterans and alcohol is a massive problem, okay? Alcohol is a drug. It might be a socially accepted drug. It might be advertised on the Super Bowl, but alcohol destroys people's lives. I've watched countless people throw their lives away to alcohol. And before the cannabis, you were on 1 million prescription drugs that are horrible for you, okay? Changing brain chemistry. I mean, these are bad things. So that's like argument's not even valid. Like, oh, well, it's a drug. No, it's just we were unfortunately raised in a country where we were pushed an extremely strong propaganda to say that, like, if you do this, you're a bad person. I personally don't smoke, but I have previously in the past. But I don't know. I've developed throughout my life like a very healthy psychology, so I think I don't need to medicate myself. But what I'll say is, I do think that it can be extremely powerful for people, and I think it can be medicinal for people. But I also do believe, and I think by having some of these honest conversations, I have some friends that the biggest proponents of cannabis in the world, and some fighters on this team, the biggest in the world. But we have to be able to have honest conversations that even in abuse, or if it becomes your whole joy and happiness in life over your responsibilities as a father, as a family man, as things like that, it can also be bad. But that's not the plant that is bad. That is lack of moderation. That is, you can become consumed by anything. So I have seen people that have developed unhealthy relationships with marijuana. And by being able to say that, I think it actually strengthens my case, because it's like, yeah, there are examples. There are examples of some people that don't use it in an efficient way. But overall, if you look at the alternatives of, do we allow this person to get absolutely smashed on alcohol every day or consume all these pharmaceutical drugs with an unbelievable list of side effects? Like, how many people have ever died from cannabis ever? It's extremely small. It's probably like genetic reactions to a compound caused by some. This is an extremely safe alternative that if it's changing people's lives, and we have a veteran that can sit across the table and say, like, listen, I was at rock bottom following your method. Your doctors, I have a hard time even saying the word doctor and thinking about your story. Your doctor, who was trying to help people, loaded me with all these things, which was destroying me, versus, federally you're saying, don't do this, and it has saved my life and my family's future and all of these things.
Look, making money for some people is just as toxic as alcohol addiction. You get guys that are locked onto their stocks at their phones all day long, and they're addicted. And that's the American dream, right? So anything can be unhealthy. But for me, it's about alternatives, right? With the cannabis use, it opened my mind up to other things that I've mentioned before. In 2018, I went to Peru, right? Because again, I wanted alternatives. What else can help me? And so I traveled to the Sacred Valley of Peru, and I went through San Pedro, which is a psychedelic cacti similar to like peyote. I'd gone to a ceremony, and then I stepped up. I tried ayahuasca as well.
I thought the story was going there. That's always the big boy.
That's the big boy, right? And the ayahuasca ceremony that I was a part of was one of the most beautiful experiences that I think it did something to my brain that literally released. When we talk about releasing the trauma, the way ayahuasca works, they say it kind of works on the amygdala portion of the brain, which is where our trauma is stored. And for me, that was an eye-opening experience, because...
Try to describe it to someone that has never done ayahuasca, or like a regular person. Let's say maybe a regular person that is holding trauma. What happened? Because countless people say that ayahuasca, or psychedelics in general, whether microdosing or extreme psychedelics, like, Joe Rogan preaches dimethyltryptamine, and regardless, it's a profound effect on the mind. Who were you before, during, and after that experience?
So before the ayahuasca experience, I was still very, very anxious, very nervous, depressed. I was still searching. Let's say I was still searching for an answer. Great. And the temple that I had gone to experience this at, it was beautiful, right? It was about 30 people, I believe, that participated into the ceremony, and the sacredness that leads up to this is not something where you just go and you're doing drugs, right? This is a religious experience. For me, was a religious experience. And it didn't taste very good, but I had you drank the ayahuasca, and about 25 minutes later, you get a little sick. You'll throw up. So I threw up pretty hard, and then after I threw up, boy, I'll tell you what, the effects started to kick in, and I remember crying, but not like normal person crying, like crying in a way that almost wasn't human. It was I tapped into a part of me that hadn't been tapped into in probably a very, very long time. And I almost to a point I almost passed out. I was crying so hard. And I remember the ayahuasquero came over, and he was beating the drums, and I could feel that energy, and he was praying and doing his thing, and And there was some military trauma that had come up, some missions that resonated with me. And I was crying, and it released. I felt like this shouldn't hurt me anymore. It was in the middle of this experience. I said that it was almost like my brain disassociated the feelings of that trauma with the actual experience, if that makes sense, right? And the Icaros, they call them, the different music that they play kind of guides that experience. And for me, the experience dealt with my combat trauma, but it also dealt with some family stuff. For me, my children are the most important thing on this planet, period. And they suffered throughout these years, right? They understood Daddy was not well. And I think that the experience, the medicine that day, told me it's okay to fail. It's okay to fail. That's not what defines you as a good parent, your failures. It's how you handle those failures and how you show your children that you can still succeed even at rock bottom, right? And we went...
So really quick, so you're going through this extreme experience, and your brain is having this experience. You're in your world, right?
Yes.
Like everything else is gone. You're in your world, and it's like your own mind is rearranging and like restructuring these thoughts. Like it sounds like that's what it was. Like you somehow found a way to create a okay relationship with your life or what had happened or what you had gone through. Because because you're probably just in a ball or sitting down or laying down, right?
Yeah, I was. Yeah, you're laying down at that point.
I'm thinking, so you're not physically, you're physically going through a lot, but this is all taking place in your mind.
Yes.
And your mind completely restructured these traumas. And do you remember any of the coherent thoughts you were having, or is it more of just an experience? Try to describe it as much detail as possible, because I'm fascinated by it.
I'll tell you. So I had a mission where a child was hurt. A child was shot, right? And for me, a lot of my nightmares and stuff would go back to seeing this kid bleeding out. And I remember the kid, he touched my boot. He had blood. He was bleeding out from his stomach, and he had reached out and he touched it. So some of his blood got on my boot. And during this ayahuasca experience, I was crying, and I'm just going. Phew. And I remember that the tears, I could almost envision my boot, and the tears washed away this blood right off my boot, and it was a relief when that happened. Like, holy shit, that kid, I shouldn't hold that. It wasn't my fault. It was my fault, but it wasn't, right? And if I harbor this, it's going to hurt my kids. The more I harbor this child's experience, this horrible, despicable thing that I was a part of causing, if I hold on to that, that's going to hurt my children that are still alive, right? And throughout the experience, I remember, I wasn't hallucinating.
How long does this last?
About 8 hours.
And how long does it feel like it lasts? Probably feels like a lifetime when you're in this experience.
Yeah, it feels, yes. Yeah, the time stops. It's about an 8-hour ride, though. And, it was funny with my daughter. I remember, because you weren't not hallucinating per se, but there are visions. It's hard to describe, but I remember after this.
Your eyes are open or your eyes are shut? Because I'm picturing you just being in this other world, but
eyes are open. You're in the dark. It's a dark. It's a temple. They have the candles and the music is going. My eyes.
So you can vividly remember the room the whole time, even while all this is going on.
Yes.
Because I've had a little bit of psychedelic experience, and I remember not really being aware of the room. I'm in my mind more so.
No, I was aware. I was aware of the room.
The whole time.
The whole time, yep. I remember seeing, I don't know, it was like the harder they beat the drums, it was like rainbows. I was like, there were some visual experiences, right? And I remember seeing a butterfly, right? And I looked and I said, it was like my daughter is what I felt. It's like a spirit animal almost, right? And I remember going home after this experience, and I said, hey, Emma, what's your spirit animal? She looked at me and she goes, a butterfly. And I said, fuck. I said, holy shit, there was something connected to this. I said, it was a, to me, like you need to let these kids grow. They need to experience this life in their image. but it's my duty as their father to make sure that they're living the best way they can, right?
So now that you're on the other side of this ayahuasca experience,
Mm-hmm.
and you dealt with these extremely painful things during that, it's like that's where you fought those battles. The battle I talked about earlier in the podcast, you fought the demon during that 8-hour experience, right? And you won. You came out on the other side being like, you know what? You can't make me hold this anymore.
Right.
The way you said it, like this, yeah, I might have been involved. Yeah, it might have been a mistake. Now I might do things differently, but you can't control me with this experience anymore. I'm letting it go. Mm-hmm. Before you went into that, were you aware that those were the experiences that were haunting you and you just didn't want to look at them? Because it's like they came to your brain on the forefront when you were going through that experience. Did you not know that those were the experiences you had to tackle?
Yeah, I would say no. Ayahuasca is known, they call it the grandmother spirit. It's like a warm hug, right? And they always say that the medicine will show you what needs to be shown, right?
So you would say before you went to the ayahuasca, if someone had told you, like, we're going to really sit down and try to analyze what is it in there that's traumatizing your brain, you couldn't have put your finger back to that moment with that child?
I wouldn't have at that point, no.
You wouldn't have?
No.
But maybe if you had really been vulnerable and we had a healthier conversation in society about vulnerability and painful experience and wanting to re-engage with those experiences and you would know that experience harmed you. It hurt you.
Right. Yeah. And you don't realize it at that time because trauma is, it's not particular.
And the ayahuasca made you deal with it almost.
Made me, absolutely. It wasn't a choice at that point. And like that experience. So when I came home, I actually ended up, I've joined the Native American church. I've been embraced. I'm not Native American, but there is a Native American church that embraces combat veterans so that we can legally have access to these beautiful sacred substances and experiences under the guidance of real medicine people.
Do you still do these psychological experiences, or did the one make enough profound change that you were able to just be the person that had come out of that experience better?
So I have not done ayahuasca since because I hold, and I say that being that I will probably soon do an experience again because it teaches you about yourself, right? And since coming back, I've lived life to where I have questions, right? Not necessarily trauma related necessarily, but where is life going to take me? And psychedelics help answer those questions. They put me into a space to where my brain can process. The problem with PTSD, with the adrenaline going all day, every day, it drives me nuts. I can't shut it off. I can't process the information. And the psychedelics really open up. They put you in a space that's safe, that allows you to process life. And I feel like it's some of the decisions I've made have been clearer and more thought out because of them, if that makes sense.
No, that makes sense. And I bet you there's psychological experiences are probably one way. I bet you forms of meditation are helping to do the same thing. Some people that connect super deeply with maybe yoga that are getting in, what it is the process of getting your mind to kind of like shut down all the chaos and work through things.
There are methods, there's one method called holotropic breathing, which is essentially a breathing method that you can induce a psychological, experience, a psychedelic experience in your own body without even having any psychedelics present. So I think it's the willingness of a person that's willing to accept these things, because it might sound hokey to some people. It may sound, and I was raised a Roman Catholic, right? Never believed in any of it. Didn't buy into a single word they said. In fact, I don't expose my children to it, right? That's just my thoughts. But this was a religious experience. I found God. I said, holy shit! I connected to what my higher power is, and.
Or is that power you?
Well, you're 100% right. You hit it. I am, in my mind, I am the power, right? And it took this experience to realize I don't necessarily have to pray to God, that I am my own God, and that I am empowered to create these experiences and create the good things that God has always been known to do, right? I will do that myself.
I've always thought about it that way. And this is not a knock on religion, because I have a lot of very religious friends, and I want you to believe whatever you believe. Whatever makes you a better human being,
Yes.
please believe that and like live your life that way. But I always looked at religion as extremely disempowering. I looked at it as like, you know, like you're being told you're this level and you have to constantly work for this like acceptance, and which like to me that's disempowering. Or like when something terrible happens to you, being like, well, that must be God's plan. That's, if you have to seize the power back into your life, you have to realize that you can take control of things and shape not just your future, your family's future and all of these things, versus you're not just a person on a ride on a cart going like, whatever the plan has for me is where I'm going. I always looked at it as a disempowering thing, because I believe that we're extremely powerful. I believe that we will shape this human experience for each other and for our children, for all these things. So it's like you're retapping into that, like, I am in control of a lot of these things. I can seek purpose. I can seek happiness. And I'm entitled to doing that, regardless of what I have been through, gone through, or maybe even caused. I am still a worthy human being. You know, that's powerful.
Religion has... for me personally, I want to understand all the religions. I love looking at religions, and I love, because they all have these wonderful messages. They're all based on good. There's no, you know what I mean? Like, it's all based upon doing good things. For me personally, organized religion wasn't the answer. But I'll tell you what, since joining the Native American Church and having that connection, the ability to know that there is a higher power, even if that is myself, is impossible. Because when you have nothing, it sucks. When you don't have that, and you there is no God, there is no nothing. What the hell am I doing here? It's lonely, and it hurts, and that translates. So, you know, with the addition of all these different religions and whatnot, I want to talk to people that are in them. I want to understand, what do you believe and why do you believe it? You know, personally, I'm not a heaven or a hell guy. I've already been to hell, so I'm cool, right? Heaven to me is if I can keep a veteran from killing themselves, right? That's heaven. And if my children grow up and they're successful and they're happy and they're not tied down by all these different social constraints that are going to add to trauma and add to their progression as an adult, I'm cool.
Doesn't that sound like a beautiful life? I agree 100%, and I look at things the same way. Like I said, you can believe whatever you want. I care about where you fall on the spectrum of good and bad to people. And those are even varying terms, but like there are basic things that overall human beings could separate right from wrong. You know, so if you're pushing the needle in the right direction and you're learning from your mistakes and you're leveling up and you're trying to serve the people around you and trying to better this world experience for all of us, that right there is success to me. And it was funny, as you were saying, for some reason, I do not ponder the questions like, what am I doing here? Is there a higher power? Like, I don't believe in God or any of these things, but something within me knows that like making people happy makes me happy, makes this experience better, because I don't know where we came from. I don't know what happens if there is a chapter 2 or not. But like for some reason, I'm just not tormented by those questions. But I'm also living my life in a way, because I hit a very rock bottom too, and I almost committed suicide. And I got to the point where, you know, it was just kind of like, if I'm going to go on, make purpose. What makes you happy? What do you enjoy? And when you really start looking at it, like, man, I love loving relationships. I love conversations with people. I love learning about other human beings and this crazy gift that we have of life. I don't care, like, in a weird way, I don't really care where it came from or whether it was bestowed upon me by some divine being or whether it's just the natural biology or the evolution of, a single-celled organism up to where I am now. At the end of the day, like, if we just work to make this thing enjoyable for each other, your own life gets better, you know? So for some reason, I'm because a lot of people say that same thing that you said, like, they're tormented by, like, you know, what comes next, or I'm just not. I don't, and maybe it's because at a young age I hit a very low bottom, and it made me just go like, I'm gonna make this life what I want it to be.
If I died tomorrow, I think people would go, wow, that guy lived a fucking hell of a life, right?
That's winning. That right there, I feel the same way. When I got up, you know what? It was my birthday was Monday of this week.
Birthday.
My birthday, right?
Mm-hmm.
I was going to stay home and play some video games. I like video games. And my girlfriend's like, you can just take the night off, da-da-da. I stayed home for a tiny bit, and I was like, I want to go to the gym. I literally came in and taught my classes because I would rather, like, I get to be around people I love, sharing in good energy, training together, being a part of community. There's nowhere else on my birthday that I wanted to go than go into my academy and be around the people that I care about. And that's where I went, like, you know what? You're doing this thing right. You may not have the answers to the giant questions yet, but you're doing this thing right.
Feeling good and good vibes and good energy is not commonplace in our society today. With the divisiveness that wherever it's come from, that we've kind of put this wedge. And so when you can tap into those good energies, we got to seize the moment, right? That's like I read the news, and it's I don't know why, it's like looking at a car accident or something. Like I scroll,
just don't.
It's doom. I doom scroll, and I'll scroll and I look, and it just gets me sick. But it's figuring out what grounds you.
But you've also developed a healthier relationship now with fear, and you've stepped back from these experiences that were tormenting you and controlling your life. Whereas most people, their fears control them to the fullest. Like, and we live in a society that 24/7 is like fear. You know what I mean? And like, so you talked about fight or flight with me earlier too. And it's like, if these people's fight or flight, if they're on red alert at all times, looking for the next problem and chaos in the world, they're missing the beauty, the wonderful conversations, the great human experiences they could be having, because their brain is trained to look for fear. It is trained to look for, like, what's the next thing that's going to harm me? And we just went through 2020 where it was more fear pumped on society than ever. So we need more of this connection, good stuff. I have not had cable since I was 22 years old. I won't have it. I will not watch the news. I will not. If I choose to read into an article or do my own research or speak to people that I consider reputable, that have information, and then even if I trust them, I will check the sources. But I will do everything in my power to separate from that constant wave of fear.
For me, I feel like now I'm kind of playing at a different level, right? I think once we get out of our 20s, I'll be 40 here in a few months, and I feel like I'm on a different level, if that makes sense. And, and
you're probably not as controlled by your emotions like you were before. Like, you can look at things more objectively. You can categorize it correctly. You can not have the emotional response that you do in your 20s when everything is an outrage,
Right. And with the news and everything that's happening, I keep going back to what is it that I can do? Like, I've thought about running for office. Do I come out of retirement, and do I want to hop into that sewer and swim in that sewer with it? No, I'd rather travel the world. But is it a duty? Is that my next calling? Is it something that I'm kind of digging into my soul about this now, because that's a huge undertaking, and it would probably weigh on me heavily, right? But is it something that I could do? I don't know.
But if it attached you to purpose, and you could serve the community, and you could work to even move the needle 1/100th of 1% towards a better future for your family and your children and our society, it's almost like what the best people in office are the people that probably didn't want to do it, but they were called to do it. Those are probably the people that I support 1,000%.
That's where I'm at. I had this conversation with my girlfriend this morning. I said, look, I'm going to look into this, and it's probably not going to be an easy process, but and we'd be giving up a lot, but not only my children, but everyone else's children. And
I'll tell you right now, man, we need more strong leaders. I mean, through 2020, I literally had people reach out to me like, you should consider running for office because you're a very powerful speaker. You're a professional fighter. People know you in the community. Like, so we need people like that are going to start trying to push the needle in the right direction. I felt the same way, man. And like you said, my first reaction was like, do I want to get into the nastiest, ugliest, most corrupt, vicious game out there just for people to like, even if you do the right thing, I bet you people are just so conditioned to be like, he must be terrible too because he's in the same field.
It would be tough. I mean, what's the first thing that they would use against me? Oh, he's crazy. He's a mental.
He has PTSD. Don't listen to him.
He's a PTSD, right? And I'm trying to rectify this in my brain, like.
But I know from our dialogue already, when you're willing to step into the light and not be afraid to point at you, that is when you're ready to serve in a position like that. Like I will stand in front of, I've spoken to audiences of 5,000 plus. I will stand in front of a group of people because I'm not ashamed of who I am. I've made mistakes. I've leveled up. I've learned from, I can stand in the light and challenge you on things that are right from wrong. I will challenge you. And most people, like, unless you get to that level, you're going to get crippled because they're going to come after you. They're going to try to make you feel a certain way about yourself. They're going to try to make other people feel a certain way about you. But when you can stand there in front of the people and be genuine and authentic and say, I'm going to try to make a difference, it's hard to stop that. That's powerful, man.
In Arabic, my last name, Harb, means war. And it's literally my name. I'm a fighter. And personally, I don't think these people have any idea what would be coming at them if I do decide to take this step. But it's about being a fighter. You know, in the fighter world, it's winners and losers. Don't be the loser. Losing is okay, right? But I think having a fighter mentality that we want to win, whatever that goal line entails, it's not a bad thing to want to win. And within that winning, doing good.
Especially if it matches morality. It matches being a good human being. If you're a good human being that is also an extreme winner, you can move the needle. Because the person that's too afraid to lead or is terrified of the spotlight that's a good human being doesn't make the impact. But then the person that's an asshole, that's a piece of shit, that is not afraid to get up, maybe they move the needle the wrong direction. Do we want those people to lead us, or do we want good human beings that go, you know what, I will stand in here and I will fight for what is right regardless of the amount of opposition, whether it's 50-50 or whether I'm standing in the 1% fighting for what is right. I'm going to fight for what is right because that is what you should do. So, man, I'm in support. You decide you want to run, because you can learn so much about someone's psychology by knowing their story. And like, I don't like people I don't like people to have really strong leadership positions that have not been through a lot, because you don't find out who you are when you're on top.
Oh, yeah.
You find out who you are
bottom.
when you hit the bottom, man, and then that's where you have to build up from. So I love people that have hit a bottom and then recreated a sense of like self, and that sense of self is a good version, because you can go a dark direction. People can be abused and harmed and hurt by life and then become those people that go out and hurt. There's an old quote, hurt people, because it's true. You know what I mean? So if you can shape yourself into a great human being after going through all that damage, that to me speaks to the essence of what you are, because otherwise you could have just gone the other route. You could have gone the guy that abandoned his children and all these things and didn't give a shit about anyone because, oh, yeah, well, I went through this and you don't understand. You easily could have done that. You know what I mean? And some people might not have blamed you for it. It's not his fault. He went through these things.
Out of everything I do, I think it's most important to me that my children feel proud of their father, right? I think that's something a lot of families have gotten away, Daddy's just making money because daddy has to support the household. Daddy don't want to be around mommy, right? And mommy's doing her thing, and you get the kids are off doing their own thing, and I want the kids to look up and say, hey, my old man was a good dude, and he did the right thing, or he tried to do the right thing, and it was good. I don't need other perspectives to tell me what is good and what is bad. I understand this because I've lived my life as a good American. I've lived my life as a good citizen and a member of our community. and I only want to see good. Why would you want to see bad, or why would you want to disparage others? That doesn't make any sense. That's completely opposite of what we're trying to do as a society.
You just hit the nail on the head so much too, that people that have been to super dark places or really, really painful experiences, if they're good people, they do not want to see others go through that at all. Like, I think the reason I had such a major calling to coach people, because I was a fighter first, and I could have just focused on myself and been a fighter. I fought for a UFC contender and fought in Brazil multiple times, when like my love had already shifted for coaching. But when I realized like my life was saved by a lot of the positive experiences I found, and when I realized that I could help a tremendous amount of people if I give that energy to them, it was like a calling. It was like, man, your life is turned around. Now it is your obligation to help others do the same. You know what I mean? And like that is something that is a part of like your spirit of who you are.
We've lost the sense of obligation to community. We are all about, what can I get? Where is my safe space?
And that's why you're miserable.
Yes.
That is why you're miserable. Whereas even if you make less money at a job, but you have an impact and you can help people and you can have a community, you're going to be happier. So when you're working 70 or 80 hours a week to put dollars on a digital screen to buy a little bit nicer of things, it is not going to lead to a happier existence.
It's tough to get to the point where you realize money don't mean shit. I could care less. I am an experienced person now. See, there was a point in the time through the 20s, I wanted the nice house and the nice cars, and I got all that, right? And I did all those things, but now it's about, I would much rather take my life savings and travel the world and experience those different cultures, because money cannot buy those experiences. They 100%. Cannot.
100%. And those experiences resonate deeply with you. Like the places I have been and the people that I've met, and it is so like I can't put a price on it. Right. And it's like I would trade that for the world, you know? And it's like you don't realize that till you kind of snap out of the rat race and go like, oh, wow, I'm meant to experience this life. I'm meant to have loving relationships. I'm meant to hear stories and have wonderful dialogue and see different cultures. Like a human being can do that. 100%. Well, man, we have gone 2 hours.
Holy shit. Really?
We have gone 2 hours of recording time. My cameras might even be dead.
Wow. That's a good conversation, though.
Nope. They're still going. But, man, absolutely stellar podcast. We would probably could go another hour, but when I looked at this, I'm like, remember I told you my average editing time is about 2 hours? This is going to be like a 5-hour one. But, man, this dialogue today was extremely enjoyable, very powerful. You know, I think anyone that listens to your story, that has heard what you've come through, will want to, you know, support your cause, see how they can help. You know, other veterans, like if you know veterans in your life that are struggling, have them listen to things like this. Like what I always tell people is like success leaves clues. When you see someone that gets their things together, there's methods there, there's processes there, there's relationships there that maybe if you network with those people or you learn from them, you can be the same person that turns your life around and can get that feeling of happiness back.
Yeah, and if anybody wants to reach out to me, my email address is aharb, H-A-R-B, at heroprojectusa.org. I'd be happy to chat with anybody.
100%. So, man, I hope you guys loved this podcast today. We might even have to do a part 2 at some point because we crushed 2 hours like it was nothing. So, man, Anton, truly it was an honor to sit with you today. It was an honor to have the conversation. And, you know, I hope to just hear about you either running for an office and, you know, I'll gladly support that venture, or, you know, hopefully the Hero Project continues to grow and continues to help people.
Thank you. It's been an honor. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, sir.